The arrival. Naomi Brooks stepped out of her car, the morning sun casting a golden glow on the pristine facade of Briarwood Medical Center. This prestigious hospital, known for its high standards and cutting-edge medical care, was the place she had envisioned herself making a meaningful impact. Today marked the beginning of her journey as a registered nurse, a dream she had nurtured for years. With a mixture of excitement and apprehension coursing through her, she adjusted her scrubs and took a deep breath, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she walked through the automatic sliding doors, a sense of foreboding washed over her. The bright lights and the bustling activity inside the hospital contrasted sharply with the cold reception she felt from some of her new colleagues. She noticed a few nurses whispering to each other, their eyes briefly flicking to her before quickly returning to their conversations. Naomi sensed their scrutiny, a feeling that settled uncomfortably in her stomach as she made her way to the nurse's station. Her heart raced when she caught the eye of a tall man in a crisp white coat. He immediately looked away, his expression unreadable. "Good morning. You must be the new nurse," chirped a cheerful voice. Naomi turned to see a young nurse with dark hair and bright eyes approaching her. "I'm Maria Diaz. Welcome to Briarwood." "Thank you, Maria. I'm Naomi," she replied, feeling a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this place wouldn't be so bad after all. As they chatted, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that Maria was the only ally she had in an otherwise hostile environment. "So, what's it like working here?" Naomi asked, trying to mask her nerves. "It can be tough," Maria admitted, glancing around as if ensuring they were alone. "Some of the staff can be a bit cliquish, but don't let that get to you. You're going to be amazing." Naomi smiled, appreciating the encouragement, but the lingering tension in the air weighed heavily on her mind. Just then, a loud voice broke through the chatter. "Naomi Brooks, is it?" Dr. Henry Lancaster strode into the nurse's station with an air of authority that demanded attention. His sharp features and piercing gaze made it clear he was not someone to be trifled with. "Let's gather for a staff meeting. I expect all of you to be on time." Naomi's heart sank. She had heard whispers about Dr. Lancaster. His reputation for being dismissive and domineering preceded him. As she followed the other nurses into the conference room, she felt the weight of their judgment on her shoulders. The meeting commenced, and Dr. Lancaster began to discuss the day's objectives. His tone was authoritative and condescending, setting the stage for an intimidating atmosphere. "We need to maintain the highest standards of care. I expect everyone to contribute effectively. Any questions?" Naomi hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She raised her hand, feeling a flicker of courage. "I have a suggestion regarding patient care protocols. Let's stick to the established procedures, shall we?" Dr. Lancaster interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. "We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Thank you for your input, but let's focus on the basics." The room fell silent, and Naomi felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. The dismissive tone struck at her confidence, leaving her feeling small and unworthy. As the meeting continued, she could sense the smirks of her colleagues, their eyes dancing with amusement. After the meeting, Naomi stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, the cool breeze brushing against her face. It was then that Maria joined her, concern etched across her features. "Hey, don't let him get to you. He does that to everyone. Just give it time. You'll find your place here." "Thanks, Maria. I just didn't expect to be shut down so quickly," Naomi sighed, staring into the distance. "I thought my experience would count for something." "It will. Trust me. You have the skills and the heart. Just keep pushing through and don't let anyone take that away from you," Maria encouraged, placing a reassuring hand on Naomi's shoulder. As they stood there, a sense of camaraderie began to blossom between them. In the midst of the hostility surrounding her, Naomi felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps with Maria's support, she could navigate the murky waters of Briarwood Medical Center and prove her worth. However, deep down, she knew that this journey would not be easy, and the real challenges were only just beginning. Later that day, Naomi found herself in the break room, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in her hands as she tried to shake off the weight of the morning staff meeting. The chatter of her colleagues filled the air, but it was the sharp, cutting remarks from Grace Morgan that pierced through the mundane sounds. Naomi had been unaware that Grace was on the warpath, but now, as she leaned against the counter, she couldn't help but overhear the veteran nurse's disparaging comments about her. "Honestly, I don't know how they hired her," Grace said, her voice dripping with condescension. "What qualifications does she really have? Just because she checks off a box doesn't mean she can handle the pressure." Naomi felt her heart sink. She glanced sideways, catching the eye of a few nurses who exchanged knowing looks, their expressions a mix of sympathy and intrigue. Maria, the young nurse who had become her ally, was not among them. Instead, she was busy preparing a tray of medications, her back turned and oblivious to the conversation unfolding. "It's like they think just being black and a nurse makes you an expert," Grace continued, her tone mocking. "I've been doing this for over 20 years. You can't just walk in and expect respect." Naomi felt her breath hitch in her throat. She wanted to confront Grace right then and there, to defend herself and her credentials, but something held her back. The reality was that Grace's words held sway. She was a senior nurse, respected by many. Naomi knew better than to engage in a public confrontation that could backfire. Instead, she took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand, providing the best patient care possible. Later that day, as Naomi made her rounds, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She entered the room of a patient, Mrs. Jenkins, a middle-aged woman recovering from surgery. Naomi had always treated her with respect and kindness, but today she noted the subtle change in the staff's demeanor when they entered the room. "Naomi, dear," Mrs. Jenkins said weakly, her voice quivering. "I overheard some of the nurses talking. They don't seem to think you're fit for this job. Is that true?" Naomi forced a smile, masking her hurt. "No, Mrs. Jenkins, I'm here to help you, and I take my job very seriously." She knew the truth. The whispers and judgments threatened to overshadow her passion for nursing. But as she cared for her patient, she vowed to herself that she would not be defined by the opinions of others. Each day at Brearwood Medical Center brought its challenges, but Naomi remained determined to rise above the negativity. She found solace in her interactions with patients, pouring her heart into every moment. With Maria's encouragement and her own resilience, she began to carve out a place for herself in a world that often felt unwelcoming. As the days turned into weeks, Naomi learned the rhythms of the hospital. She established connections with patients who appreciated her compassion and expertise. Each small victory, each grateful smile, bolstered her confidence. But lurking beneath the surface were the undercurrents of prejudice and doubt from some of her colleagues. Challenges she would have to confront as she continued her journey. One morning, as she prepared for her shift, Naomi felt a sense of resolve wash over her. She would not allow the negativity to dampen her spirit. With each patient she cared for, she would demonstrate her worth, show that her qualifications were not merely a checkbox, but a testament to her hard work and dedication. The journey ahead was daunting, but Naomi was ready to face it head-on, one compassionate act at a time. Facing challenges, Naomi arrived at Brearwood Medical Center with a sense of determination that overshadowed the lingering doubt from her early days. As she stepped into the bustling environment, she felt a surge of purpose. Each day brought new opportunities to learn and grow, and she was eager to immerse herself in the world of nursing, despite the challenges that awaited her. The first few hours of her shift passed swiftly, filled with patient assessments, medication rounds, and the occasional moment of laughter shared with Maria. Their friendship had become a cornerstone of her experience at Brearwood, and Maria's unwavering support provided Naomi with the courage to face each day. However, as the day wore on, Naomi felt the familiar tension creep back into her consciousness. During lunch in the break room, Naomi sat at a table with Maria and a few other nurses. They were discussing an upcoming hospital initiative aimed at improving patient care when Grace walked in, her presence dominating the room. Naomi could feel the air shift as Grace's sharp gaze fell upon her, the underlying animosity palpable. "Are we really going to waste time on another one of these feel-good initiatives?" Grace remarked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "We all know that what really matters is experience. Some of us have been doing this long enough to know what works and what doesn't." Naomi clenched her fists under the table, refusing to rise to the bait. She glanced at Maria, who was visibly uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Instead, she attempted to steer the conversation in a different direction. "Well, I think it's great that we're trying to improve patient experiences. Sometimes a fresh perspective can be valuable," Maria interjected, her voice steady but firm. Grace rolled her eyes, her dismissive demeanor casting a shadow over the conversation. "Sure, if you like that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, the patients just want results, not a bunch of fluff." Naomi took a deep breath, feeling the tension radiate through her colleagues. She wanted to speak up, to challenge Grace's cynicism, but the weight of her earlier experiences held her back. Instead, she focused on her lunch, forcing herself to ignore the negative energy in the room. As the conversation shifted to other topics, Naomi excused herself and stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The sun was shining, and the crisp breeze helped clear her mind. She leaned against the building, soaking in the warmth, but her thoughts remained tangled in the frustrations of the break room. "Hey, you okay?" Maria asked, joining her outside. I could feel the tension back there. Grace really knows how to make it uncomfortable. "I'm fine," Naomi replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "I just don't get why she has to be like that. I came here to help people, and I thought that's what everyone wanted too." Maria nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know it's tough. Some people just feel threatened by change, especially when it comes from someone new. But you're doing great work. Just keep focusing on your patients and don't let her get under your skin." Naomi appreciated Maria's words, but the challenge of maintaining her composure was becoming increasingly difficult. Each negative comment from Grace felt like a blow to her self-esteem, a reminder that her presence was not universally welcomed. As the days turned into weeks, the dynamic between Naomi and Grace became more pronounced. Naomi made it a point to stay professional, focusing on patient care and her responsibilities. However, Grace's disdainful remarks continued to echo in the hallways, a constant reminder of the hurdles she had to navigate. One afternoon, during a particularly busy shift, Naomi was assigned to care for a patient named Mr. Thompson, an elderly man recovering from a hip replacement. Mr. Thompson was known for his lively spirit and engaging conversations, and he quickly warmed to Naomi's friendly demeanor. As she helped him with his physical therapy exercises, they exchanged stories and laughter, creating a bond that made the tough rehabilitation process a bit easier. "You know, Naomi," Mr. Thompson said, grinning through the pain, "you've got a real talent for this. I've had my fair share of nurses, but you really care. It shows." Naomi felt a swell of pride. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That means a lot coming from you." She was beginning to believe that perhaps she could make a difference, despite the challenges posed by her colleagues. Later that day, as she assisted Mr. Thompson with his physical therapy, Grace entered the room without so much as a knock. "What's going on in here?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Is everything under control?" Naomi kept her composure, turning to Grace with a smile. "We're just doing some exercises to help with Mr. Thompson's recovery." Grace scrutinized the pair for a moment, her gaze landing on Mr. Thompson. "You don't need to coddle them. He needs to toughen up if he's going to get through this. You can't be so soft with these patients." Naomi felt a familiar flush of embarrassment, but held her ground. "Mr. Thompson is doing his best, Grace. A little encouragement goes a long way in recovery." Grace crossed her arms, unimpressed. "Well, you might want to rethink your approach. Tough love is what gets results. This isn't a daycare." Mr. Thompson, who had been silently observing the exchange, spoke up. "I appreciate Naomi's approach. It makes me feel valued. not just another case to check off. His voice, though weak, was firm. Grace glared at him, clearly annoyed that her authority had been challenged. "You'll see. Just wait. You might think you need kindness now, but in the end, what you really need is discipline." With that, she turned on her heel and walked out of the room, leaving a charged silence in her wake. Naomi took a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension that Grace's presence had injected into the room. "Don't let her get to you," Mr. Thompson said gently. "You're doing a great job. Sometimes it's hard for people to see beyond their own experiences." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I appreciate your support," Naomi replied, her heart swelling with gratitude. It was moments like these that reminded her of why she had chosen nursing in the first place. As the days progressed, Naomi found herself facing the reality of her situation. The whispers continued, the subtle undermining from her colleagues never fully dissipated. Yet, she remained resolute in her commitment to her patients, drawing strength from their appreciation and the few colleagues who offered her kindness. One evening, during a particularly challenging shift, Naomi was assigned to the intensive care unit, a place that both excited and terrified her. As she entered the unit, she felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The patients here were critically ill, and every decision mattered. She was immediately assigned to assist a nurse named Linda, who was known for her calm demeanor and sharp skills. Linda welcomed Naomi with a warm smile. "Glad to have you on the team tonight. Just remember to take things one step at a time." Naomi nodded, grateful for the encouragement. As they worked through the night, Linda took the time to explain the intricacies of patient care in the ICU, guiding Naomi through the processes while allowing her to take the lead when appropriate. After several hours, Naomi found herself in a rhythm, her confidence growing with each task. She felt more in control, more capable. The camaraderie with Linda contrasted sharply with her experiences with Grace, and Naomi relished the supportive environment. As the shift drew to a close, Linda turned to Naomi, her expression serious. "I've seen the way some of the staff have treated you. Don't let them dim your light. You have a unique perspective and compassion that this team desperately needs. It's easy for people to fall into a pattern of cynicism, but you can break that mold." Naomi felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Linda. That means a lot. I really want to make a difference here." "You will," Linda assured her, "but remember, you also have to stand up for yourself. Don't be afraid to speak your truth, even if it's uncomfortable." That night, as Naomi drove home, she reflected on Linda's words. The challenges at Breerwood were undeniable, but she had the power to navigate them on her terms. With each passing day, she was learning not only to care for her patients, but also to advocate for herself and for what she believed in. The next morning, as she prepared for another day, Naomi felt a renewed sense of purpose. Armed with the support of Maria and Linda, she was ready to confront the challenges that lay ahead, determined to prove that compassion and dedication could thrive in a world often dominated by negativity and cynicism. No longer would she allow the opinions of others to overshadow her worth as a nurse. She entered the hospital with her head held high, ready to face whatever came her way. Each patient encounter, each opportunity to make a difference, fueled her commitment to her profession. As she walked through the bustling halls of Breerwood Medical Center, Naomi knew that she was not just a nurse. She was a beacon of hope and resilience, ready to shine brightly in a world that needed it more than ever. Building resilience. Naomi's determination to thrive at Breerwood Medical Center grew stronger with each passing day. With the supportive presence of Maria and Linda bolstering her confidence, she began to carve out a niche for herself within the bustling corridors of the hospital. However, the shadows of doubt and prejudice that lingered around her were far from vanquished. Each interaction with Grace and a few other senior staff members served as a reminder that she had to navigate a landscape fraught with challenges, both seen and unseen. As the days unfolded, Naomi dove deeper into her nursing duties, treating every patient encounter as an opportunity to learn and grow. She found herself particularly drawn to a young boy named Jamal, who had been admitted for treatment of a chronic respiratory condition. Jamal was bright-eyed and full of energy, despite his circumstances, and Naomi felt an immediate connection with him. One day, as she entered his room, she found him sketching on a notepad, his fingers smudged with charcoal. "What are you working on?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "It's a superhero," he replied, his face lighting up with enthusiasm. "He can fly and shoot lasers from his eyes. He helps kids who are sick feel better." Naomi smiled, sitting down beside him. "I love it. What's his name?" "Captain Breathe Easy," he said proudly. "He teaches kids to take deep breaths so they can be strong like him." "That's a fantastic idea. Maybe I can borrow him to help me with my patients too." Naomi laughed, her heart swelling with warmth. Jamal giggled, clearly pleased with the thought. "You should. I can make you a drawing of him." As Jamal shared his ideas and dreams, Naomi felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was why she had become a nurse, to make a difference in the lives of her patients, to uplift them during their most challenging times. Each moment spent with Jamal became a precious reminder that her role extended beyond medical treatment. It involved nurturing hope and resilience in those she cared for. However, as she formed bonds with her patients, the toxic atmosphere within the staff continued to loom over her. During another lunch break in the crowded break room, Naomi sat with Maria, Linda, and a few other nurses, discussing patient cases and sharing lighthearted stories. Laughter filled the air, creating a much-needed respite from the daily pressures of their demanding work. Just as the conversation shifted to a particularly amusing patient story, Grace entered, her presence casting an immediate shadow over the laughter. Well, if it isn't the dream team," she scoffed, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the group. "I hope you're not too busy laughing to actually do your jobs." Naomi felt the room's atmosphere shift as Grace's tone dripped with sarcasm. The camaraderie they had built in that moment felt fragile, and she could sense her colleagues stiffening. "We were just sharing some positive experiences," Maria replied, her voice steady but cautious. "Positive experiences," Grace echoed, her brow furrowing. "That's all well and good, but we're not here for therapy sessions. We're here to save lives. Let's focus on that instead of wasting time on feel-good stories." Naomi clenched her jaw, feeling the familiar wave of frustration wash over her. Grace's words felt like daggers, piercing the protective bubble they had created. "We're doing both, Grace," Naomi replied, keeping her tone measured. "Building a supportive environment is just as important as clinical skills. Happy nurses lead to happy patients." Grace's eyes flashed with disdain. "You can't expect to create change with that kind of mindset. This isn't some touchy-feely workshop. It's a hospital. It's about hard work and results." Before Naomi could respond, Linda chimed in. "And sometimes, that hard work includes fostering relationships with our patients. Compassionate care is crucial, Grace. If you can't see that, maybe you should reconsider how you approach your job." For a moment, there was a tense silence as Grace processed Linda's words. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed out of the break room, leaving a palpable tension in her wake. Naomi's heart raced. She admired Linda for standing up to Grace, but she couldn't shake the unease that settled within her. "Thanks for having my back," Naomi said quietly to Linda, who offered her a reassuring smile. "But I don't know how long we can keep this up. It's exhausting." Maria nodded in agreement. "We have to stay united. Grace may be loud, but we have each other's backs, and that matters." As the weeks rolled on, Naomi continued to focus on her patients and hone her skills, but the challenges at Brearwood persisted. Jamal's condition fluctuated, requiring more intensive treatment, and Naomi found herself working late nights and extra shifts to ensure he received the care he needed. Their bond deepened with every interaction, and Naomi was determined to be there for him through it all. One evening, as Naomi entered Jamal's room, she could see the weariness etched on his small face. "Hey, Captain, breathe easy." She greeted him with a smile, hoping to lighten his spirits. "Hey," Jamal replied softly, his voice lacking its usual energy. "I don't feel so good today." Concern immediately flooded Naomi's heart. She pulled up a chair beside his bed, gently taking his hand in hers. "What's bothering you? Is it your breathing?" Jamal shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm scared. What if I never get better? What if I can't be a superhero?" Naomi felt her heart ache for him. "It's okay to feel scared, Jamal. You're going through a lot, but you're not alone. I'm right here with you. Remember, every superhero has to face tough battles." "But what if I lose?" he whispered, vulnerability breaking through his bravado. Naomi leaned closer, her voice steady. "You won't lose. You're already winning because you're fighting. You're stronger than you think. And together, we'll get through this." Captain Breathe Easy wouldn't give up. "And neither will you." Jamal's eyes sparkled slightly at her words, his spirit rekindled. "You really think so?" "I know so," Naomi affirmed, squeezing his hand. "And we'll make sure to draw Captain Breathe Easy flying high once you're better. He'll be the hero that you are." As they talked, Naomi realized that her role extended beyond medical care. She was a source of hope, an anchor amidst the uncertainty. That night, as she left the hospital, she reflected on how far she had come and the importance of resilience, not just for herself, but for her patients. However, the following day brought unexpected turmoil. Grace, who had been increasingly hostile, escalated her campaign against Naomi. During a particularly busy shift, Grace publicly questioned Naomi's decisions in front of a group of nurses, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Naomi, do you really think we have the luxury of coddling our patients, or is this just another one of your little experiments in empathy?" she mocked, crossing her arms. The other nurses looked on, some with raised eyebrows, others with barely concealed smirks. Naomi felt her cheeks flush, the heat of embarrassment creeping up her neck. "I'm just following the care protocols we discussed," Naomi replied, her voice steady but strained. "Patients respond better when they feel supported." "Supported or spoiled?" Grace shot back. "We're not running a daycare here. We need to toughen them up." "Grace, this isn't about toughness," Naomi countered, her heart racing. "It's about care and trust. You can't build resilience in a patient if they feel abandoned." The room fell silent as Naomi spoke, her colleagues watching intently. There was a moment of tension, and for a second, Naomi feared she had overstepped. But then, Linda stepped forward. "Naomi is right. Compassion is a crucial part of patient care. You can't ignore the emotional side of healing." Grace glared at Linda, but the collective support from Naomi's colleagues began to shift the atmosphere. "We're not here to judge each other's methods. We need to support one another, especially in front of our patients," Linda continued, her voice unwavering. Feeling emboldened, Naomi looked around at her peers. "We can be effective nurses without sacrificing compassion. We can be both competent and caring. I believe our patients deserve that." Grace huffed, clearly frustrated but outnumbered. "Whatever, you'll see. You can't be too nice without consequences." As Grace stormed away, Naomi felt a mix of relief and empowerment. She had stood her ground, and her colleagues' support reminded her that she was not alone. The battle with Grace was far from over, but in that moment, she felt a renewed sense of strength. As the weeks turned into months, Naomi's confidence grew alongside her skills. She continued to bond with Jamal, supporting him through his treatment, celebrating each small victory. Gradually, he started to show improvement, his spirit soaring alongside his physical health. One sunny afternoon, after a successful therapy session, Jamal sat up in bed, a broad grin plastered across his face. "Guess what? Captain Breathe Easy is officially going to be a real superhero," he declared, excitement bubbling over. Naomi laughed, her heart swelling with pride. "What does that mean?" "It means I can go home soon. I'm going to tell all the kids to take deep breaths and be strong like me." "That's amazing, Jamal," Naomi exclaimed, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. You've worked so hard for this. Jamal's face turned serious for a moment. But I couldn't have done it without you, Naomi. You're my superhero. Naomi knelt beside him, touched by his words. You're the real superhero, Jamal. You fought through all of this, and I'm so proud of you. As she stood to leave, she felt a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment. Her journey was fraught with challenges, but each patient encounter reminded her why she had chosen this path. She was not just a nurse. She was a lifeline for those who needed it most, and with every patient she cared for, she was building a legacy of compassion and resilience. As she walked through the hospital halls, she reflected on the strength she had gained. While she would continue to face opposition from some colleagues, she understood that her journey was about more than just overcoming adversity. It was about fostering a culture of empathy in healthcare, one patient at a time. With her heart full and her spirit unyielding, Naomi knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The turning point. As Naomi settled into her role at Brearwood Medical Center, she discovered that the true essence of nursing extended beyond administering medication and performing procedures. It encompassed the profound connections forged with patients. Her daily interactions were not merely a series of tasks, but a tapestry of human experiences, each thread woven with care, empathy, and understanding. One crisp morning, as autumn leaves danced outside, Naomi entered the pediatric ward to find Jamal perched on the edge of his bed, excitement radiating from him. He had been preparing for his discharge later that day, and his recovery had been remarkable. The transformation from the frail, anxious boy she had first met to the vibrant, hopeful child sitting before her filled Naomi with pride. Naomi, he called out, waving her over with an infectious smile. Guess what? I'm going home today. That's amazing, Jamal. You've worked so hard, and I'm so proud of you, she said, her heart swelling with joy. He glanced around, lowering his voice conspiratorially. You know what I'm going to do when I get home. I'm going to tell everyone about Captain Breathe Easy. I want to make my own comic book. Naomi chuckled, settling onto the edge of his bed. That sounds fantastic. You should definitely do that. Captain Breathe Easy needs his own adventures. Jamal grinned and started sketching on a fresh notepad, his enthusiasm contagious. I'll draw you as his sidekick. You can help him fight off the germs. As Jamal immersed himself in his drawing, Naomi took a moment to reflect on how far they both had come. Their bond had grown into something more profound than just caregiver and patient. It had become a partnership in resilience. For her, caring for Jamal represented the heart of nursing, the ability to inspire hope and courage even in the face of adversity. However, as the day wore on, Naomi could feel the familiar undercurrents of tension returning. Word had spread among the staff about Jamal's impending discharge, and while many expressed their congratulations, Grace remained unmoved. In fact, Naomi had overheard her dismissing Jamal's progress as mere luck. Later that afternoon, the hospital hosted a small farewell gathering for Jamal in the pediatric ward, complete with balloons and a cake. Friends, family, and staff came together to celebrate his remarkable recovery. As Naomi entered the room, she was struck by the atmosphere of joy and camaraderie that filled the space. Surprise! Everyone shouted as Jamal entered, his eyes widening in delight. The colorful decorations, along with the laughter and well wishes, created an unforgettable moment. Thank you, everyone. Jamal beamed, taking in the warmth of the occasion. This is the best day ever. Naomi stood back, watching the scene unfold with a sense of satisfaction. She had advocated for Jamal's care tirelessly, ensuring that his emotional needs were met alongside his medical ones. As she interacted with his family, answering questions, and providing guidance, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. However, amidst the celebration, Grace sauntered in, her presence instantly altering the atmosphere. She stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips as she observed the festivities. Isn't this a little much for a kid who just got lucky with his recovery? Grace commented loudly, drawing the attention of several nurses who had been mingling. "We're celebrating mediocrity now." Naomi felt her heart sink. The joy of the moment was suddenly overshadowed by Grace's negativity. "Jamal worked incredibly hard to get to this point," Naomi replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil brewing inside her. "This celebration is about recognizing his strength and resilience." Grace scoffed. "Strength and resilience? He's just a kid who got a break. Let's not delude ourselves here." Naomi's anger flared, but she took a deep breath, channeling her frustration into words that could stand firm. "It's easy to diminish someone else's accomplishments when you're not willing to see the bigger picture. Jamal's journey has been anything but easy. He deserves this celebration." A few nurses murmured in agreement, sensing the tension in the room. Linda stepped forward, her expression resolute. "Grace, it's not about the degree of illness, but the journey each patient undertakes. Celebrating milestones fosters a sense of community and hope. If you can't see that, then maybe you should reevaluate your perspective on nursing." For a brief moment, silence enveloped the room. Grace opened her mouth to retort, but stopped, her eyes narrowing as she absorbed Linda's words. Finally, she turned and walked away, her face a mask of indignation. As the celebration resumed, Naomi felt a mix of relief and determination. The support of her colleagues, especially Linda, had fortified her resolve to advocate for her patients. In that moment, she realized that standing up for what was right was part of her duty as a nurse, and she would continue to do so no matter the consequences. After the festivities, as Jamal prepared to leave, he turned to Naomi with bright eyes. "You're going to visit me, right? I want to show you my comic book when it's done." "Of course, I wouldn't miss it for the world," she promised, hugging him tightly. "And remember, you're a superhero now. Never forget that." With tears of joy in his eyes, Jamal waved goodbye, and Naomi felt a bittersweet ache in her heart. She had poured so much of herself into his care, and watching him leave felt like a personal victory and a farewell to a cherished connection. That night, as Naomi drove home, the events of the day replayed in her mind. She felt invigorated by Jamal's progress, but still haunted by Grace's antagonism. The situation at Breerwood was a constant battle, one that demanded both strength and resilience. The following day brought a new shift, and as Naomi stepped into the hospital, she resolved to stay focused on her patients and her purpose. However, the weight of Grace's presence loomed large. The tension between them had become a palpable force, and Naomi found herself increasingly wary of their interactions. In the following weeks, the landscape at Breerwood continued to shift. New patients arrived, and Naomi poured her heart into each case, finding solace in the small victories and connections she forged. However, with each new patient, Grace seemed more determined to undermine her at every opportunity. One day, as Naomi prepared for a busy shift in the pediatric ward, she was assigned a new patient, a little girl named Lily who had been admitted for severe asthma. As Naomi entered Lily's room, she was met with the sight of a tiny girl curled up in bed, her mother sitting by her side, anxiety etched across her face. "Hi there. I'm Naomi, and I'll be your nurse today," she said gently, kneeling down to Lily's level. "How are you feeling?" Lily looked up with wide eyes, her small fingers clutching a stuffed animal. "It's hard to breathe," she whispered, fear evident in her voice. Naomi's heart ached for her. "I understand, sweetheart. We're going to help you feel better. I'll be right here with you, and we'll make sure you're comfortable." As Naomi assessed Lily's condition and discussed a care plan with her mother, she felt a familiar sense of purpose wash over her. Each interaction, each reassuring word, reinforced her belief in the power of compassionate care. However, as the shift progressed, Naomi could sense Grace's watchful eyes on her from the nurse's station. It was clear that Grace was waiting for an opportunity to pounce, to criticize any misstep or perceived weakness. Naomi took a deep breath, determined to stay focused on Lily and provide the best care possible. Throughout the day, Naomi remained attentive to Lily's needs, implementing breathing exercises and medication protocols that encouraged her to manage her asthma effectively. She was careful to involve Lily in the process, explaining each step in a way that empowered the little girl. But just as they were making progress, Grace swooped in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Naomi, how can you expect a child to follow your breathing exercises if she's scared? Perhaps a little more discipline might work wonders." Naomi felt a rush of frustration but maintained her composure. "Lily is doing her best, Grace. Fear is a natural response when dealing with asthma, especially for a child. It's important to build her confidence and trust, not intimidate her." Grace smirked, clearly unperturbed. "Well, good luck with that. Just remember that while you're busy playing nurse, the real work requires a firm hand." As Grace walked away, Naomi felt the weight of her words hanging in the air, but she refused to let them affect her. Instead, she knelt down beside Lily, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. "You know, Lily, you're doing a fantastic job. We're in this together, and you're so brave." Lily managed a small smile, and Naomi's heart soared at the spark of trust she saw forming. Together, they continued working on the breathing exercises, and with each successful attempt, Naomi felt a sense of victory blossoming within her. As the shift came to an end, Naomi felt exhausted but fulfilled. She had fought against the negativity of Grace, standing firm in her commitment to compassionate care. The experience reinforced her belief that every child deserved to be treated with kindness, especially when facing health challenges. However, the battle was far from over. Grace's influence loomed large, and Naomi knew that to create lasting change, she needed to find a way to channel her frustration into constructive action. That evening, she reached out to Maria and Linda, seeking their advice and support. Over coffee in the hospital's quiet corner, they discussed the persistent challenges posed by Grace and brainstormed ways to address the toxicity in their environment. "We can't keep letting her dictate the atmosphere around here," Maria said passionately. "We need to stand together, not just for ourselves but for our patients." Linda nodded in agreement. "It's essential to foster a culture of support and empathy. We should consider discussing our concerns with the management. It's time for a change." Naomi felt a rush of hope. "You're right. We have to advocate for a healthier work environment, not just for us, but for every patient who walks through those doors." As they strategized, Naomi felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would require courage and resilience, but she was ready to take a stand, not just for herself, but for the values she believed in. The following day, armed with determination, Naomi decided it was time to take action. She gathered her thoughts and drafted an email to the hospital administration, outlining her concerns about the toxic environment and the impact it had on patient care. She didn't want to name names, but she made it clear that a supportive atmosphere was crucial for providing the best possible care. When she shared her plan with Maria and Linda, they both expressed their unwavering support. "We're with you," Maria assured her, "and we can present it as a team. Together, we can create change." As Naomi pressed send on the email, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was a small step, but it was a declaration of her commitment to fostering compassion and support in her workplace. In the days that followed, Naomi focused on her patients, determined to create an oasis of kindness in the midst of the chaos. She poured herself into her work, drawing strength from the bonds she formed and the small victories she celebrated. Little did she know that her decision to speak out would set in motion a series of events that would challenge the very foundations of Brearwood Medical Center. The journey ahead would test her resilience, but she was ready to face whatever lay in store. With each day, she grew more committed to her purpose, transforming not only the lives of her patients, but also the culture of the hospital itself. Rising tensions. As the weeks rolled on, the air in Brearwood Medical Center grew thick with tension. Naomi's decision to advocate for a more compassionate workplace had ignited a conversation that reverberated through the hospital's halls. Her email to the administration had sparked both support and resistance. Some colleagues rallied around her, while others, particularly Grace, were indignant, seeing her actions as a direct challenge to their authority and the established order. Despite the brewing storm, Naomi remained resolute in her commitment to her patients and her newfound mission to foster a supportive environment. She poured herself into her work, connecting with patients like Jamal and Lily, whose journeys had become emblematic of her purpose. Each smile and word of gratitude from her young patients reinforced her belief in the power of empathy. However, the fallout from her email began to take its toll. The day-to-day dynamics of the nursing staff shifted dramatically. Some nurses, inspired by Naomi's courage, began to voice their concerns about the toxic culture, sharing their own stories of feeling undervalued and dismissed. Others, especially those aligned with Grace, saw this as an opportunity to solidify their positions, rallying against what they perceived as an uprising. Naomi noticed the subtle changes during her shifts. Conversations that had once been lighthearted now carried an undercurrent of tension. The break room, once a refuge for camaraderie, became a battleground of hushed whispers and sidelong glances. Grace, emboldened by the support of her allies, became more aggressive in her criticisms of Naomi's approach to patient care. One afternoon, during a particularly hectic shift, Naomi was assigned to assist with a patient transfer from the emergency room to the pediatric ward. As she wheeled the gurney through the corridors, she encountered Grace, who was busy with a group of nurses. The moment Grace spotted her, a smirk spread across her face, and she called out loudly, "Careful there, Naomi. Don't forget to coddle them too much. Wouldn't want them to get used to all that attention." Naomi's heart raced at the taunt, but she held her head high, determined not to let Grace's antics affect her. "I'm just making sure our patients receive the best care possible, Grace. Every child deserves compassion," she replied, her voice steady. Grace scoffed, but Naomi pushed past her, maintaining her focus on the patient. However, the incident served as a reminder that the battle for a better workplace was not merely a theoretical concept. It was a very real struggle that would require her unwavering resolve. Later that week, Naomi attended a staff meeting called by the hospital administration to address the ongoing concerns about workplace culture. The conference room buzzed with murmurs as nurses took their seats, an air of anticipation hanging over the gathering. Naomi could sense the palpable tension as Grace and her supporters positioned themselves at the back of the room, casting wary glances at Naomi and her allies. As the meeting commenced, the hospital director spoke about the importance of teamwork and fostering a positive environment. "We want every staff member to feel valued and supported," she began, glancing at Naomi, who was seated near the front. "We recognize that recent feedback has highlighted some areas for improvement." Naomi's heart raced at the mention of the feedback. She felt a surge of hope that the administration was taking the concerns seriously. However, as the meeting progressed, it became evident that Grace and her faction were prepared to dismiss the entire conversation. When the floor was open for discussion, Grace shot her hand up. "I think it's important we don't mistake camaraderie for incompetence," she stated, her voice dripping with disdain. "There's a reason we've had high standards here at Breerwood, and I don't think we should cater to feelings at the expense of efficiency." Naomi felt her blood boil. Grace's comments were not only dismissive, they threatened to undermine the very foundation of compassionate care. As a few nurses nodded in agreement with Grace, Naomi realized that she needed to take a stand. "I believe we can maintain high standards without sacrificing compassion," Naomi interjected, her voice firm. "Caring for our patients is not just about efficiency. It's about building trust and rapport. We are nurses, not just technicians. Our role is to treat the whole person, not just their symptoms." The room fell silent, and for a moment, Naomi felt exposed. But then, one by one, other nurses began to voice their support for her perspective. Linda stood up next, passionately stating, "We need to foster an environment where everyone feels safe to express their concerns. It's not about coddling patients, it's about providing holistic care. When patients feel cared for emotionally, they tend to recover faster." As more voices joined in, Naomi felt a swell of solidarity. Together, they created a chorus advocating for change. But Grace, sensing her control slipping, quickly retorted, "Are we really going to let a few complaints dictate how we run things here? This is a hospital, not a therapy session." The tension in the room thickened, and Naomi could feel the divide growing deeper. Those who had aligned themselves with Grace were visibly irritated, while others were energized by the collective support. The meeting ended in a chaotic flurry, with no clear resolution in sight, but the lines had been drawn. The next few shifts were fraught with challenges as the divide within the nursing staff deepened. Naomi found herself facing not only Grace's overt hostility, but also the quiet resistance of those who felt torn between the two factions. Some nurses she had considered friends began to distance themselves, hesitant to take sides in the growing conflict. One afternoon, as Naomi was preparing to assist with patient rounds, Maria approached her, a concerned look on her face. "I've been hearing whispers about the administration's response to your email," she said quietly. "They're planning to hold a follow-up meeting next week, and some of the senior staff are pushing back hard." Naomi's heart sank at the news. "What do you mean pushing back?" "They want to present it as if the issues are exaggerated, downplaying the need for any real change," Maria explained, her brow furrowed with worry. "Grace has been rallying support, and I'm afraid they might try to discredit you." Naomi felt a mix of anger and frustration rise within her. This isn't just about me. It's about creating a culture that prioritizes patient care and employee well-being. How can they not see that? Maria placed a comforting hand on Naomi's shoulder. "We need to prepare for the meeting. We can't let them downplay the importance of this conversation. You've started something important, and we need to see it through." Naomi took a deep breath, realizing the weight of their situation. If the administration was going to ignore the voices of those advocating for a better work environment, she and her allies would have to find a way to ensure their concerns were heard. The thought of standing up against the entrenched negativity felt daunting, but she understood that she could not back down. Over the next few days, Naomi, Maria, and Linda began to organize a strategy for the upcoming meeting. They reached out to colleagues who had voiced support during the previous discussion, encouraging them to share their experiences and insights during the next gathering. They knew that a united front was their strongest weapon. As the day of the meeting approached, Naomi felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She prepared notes detailing specific instances where a lack of support had led to detrimental outcomes for both patients and staff. Each story was a reminder of why she had chosen this path, a testament to the compassion that needed to be at the forefront of their work. On the day of the meeting, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Nurses filled the conference room, and as the administration took their seats, Naomi felt a surge of adrenaline. This was her moment, and she was ready to advocate for the change she believed in. As the meeting began, the director opened with a brief overview of the previous discussions. "We appreciate your feedback and are committed to making Briarwood a more supportive environment," she said, glancing at Naomi. "We recognize that there are areas for improvement." Naomi felt her heart race as she prepared to speak. "Thank you for acknowledging the need for change. I believe that fostering a culture of empathy is crucial not only for our patients, but also for the well-being of the staff," she began, her voice steady. She shared her experiences, recounting specific instances where patients had benefited from a compassionate approach. "When we treat our patients with respect and kindness, we create a healing environment. But when we dismiss their needs, we not only harm them but also undermine our own morale as caregivers." As she spoke, she could see the reactions of her colleagues in the audience, nurses nodding in agreement, some visibly moved. However, she also noticed Grace and her supporters exchanging glances, their expressions a mixture of disdain and disbelief. When Naomi finished, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had said what needed to be said, and she could see that she was not alone in her convictions. Linda followed with her own insights, echoing Naomi's sentiments and adding her experiences. But Grace was not about to let this go unchallenged. While I appreciate the passion behind these sentiments, she interjected, her voice dripping with condescension, I think it's essential we remember that this is a hospital. We must prioritize efficiency over emotional sentiment. Naomi heard whispers of Grace's growing influence, particularly among newer nurses who looked to her as a mentor. The divide grew wider, and the morale within the hospital fluctuated like a pendulum, swinging between hope and despair. With every news story shared in the meetings, Naomi felt a sense of empowerment building, yet she also recognized the potential for conflict as Grace's faction rallied against them. One evening, as Naomi prepared for another long shift, she received a message from Maria. Meet me in the break room before your shift starts. We need to talk, it read. Intrigued and a bit anxious, Naomi made her way to the break room, her heart racing at the thought of what new challenges awaited. When she entered, Maria was already there, pacing back and forth, her expression tense. I just got off a call with Linda, Maria began, her voice low. Grace has been trying to convince the administration that we're creating a hostile environment. She's claiming that our meetings are inciting division among the staff. Naomi felt her stomach drop. Are you serious? We're trying to improve things, not tear them apart. I know, Maria replied, running a hand through her hair. But Grace is framing it as if we're the ones causing chaos. She's very persuasive, and some of the management is starting to listen to her. Then we need to be more proactive, Naomi said, her resolve hardening. We can't let her narrative take hold. We need to demonstrate the benefits of our approach and how it's positively impacting patient care. We have to show them that change is not just necessary, it's beneficial. Maria nodded, her eyes brightening. You're right. Let's gather more testimonials and data. We can create a presentation to share at the next staff meeting, highlighting the success stories from our initiative. As they brainstormed ideas, Naomi felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was her chance to not only defend their cause but to put it on the front lines. They quickly began reaching out to colleagues for input and assistance, determined to showcase the positive changes that had emerged from their push for compassion. The following week, as they finalized their presentation, they received an unexpected boost when Jamal's mother reached out to Naomi. She wanted to share her son's story and how his experience at Brearwood had been transformative thanks to the supportive staff, particularly Naomi. Jamal talks about you all the time, Naomi, she said over the phone, her voice filled with gratitude. He feels empowered and loved. He's thriving now because he believes he can conquer anything. And that's because of you. Touched by her words, Naomi asked if they could include Jamal's story in their presentation. Absolutely. I want everyone to know how much you've helped him, she replied, her voice resolute. With the presentation date approaching, Naomi, Maria, and Linda dedicated themselves to ensuring they had a comprehensive and compelling argument for their initiative. They gathered patient testimonials, statistical evidence of patient recovery times, and feedback from staff members about the positive changes they had experienced since the push for compassion began. On the day of the meeting, a palpable tension filled the air as staff members filed into the conference room. Naomi felt the weight of anticipation settle on her shoulders, a mixture of excitement and apprehension coursing through her veins. She glanced around the room and spotted Grace seated at the back, her arms crossed and a look of disdain plastered across her face. Naomi's heart raced, but she quickly steeled herself. This was her moment to stand up for what she believed in. As the meeting began, the director welcomed everyone and outlined the agenda. Today, we will hear from Naomi Brooks and her team regarding the recent efforts to improve our workplace culture. Please welcome Naomi. With a deep breath, Naomi stood and walked to the front of the room. The murmurs subsided as she began her presentation, outlining the rationale behind their initiative and the importance of fostering a compassionate environment. Compassion is not a luxury. It's a necessity in our field, she said, her voice steady. Studies show that when healthcare providers treat patients with empathy, recovery rates improve, satisfaction increases, and the overall well-being of both patients and staff flourishes. She shared testimonials from patients like Jamal, recounting his journey from fear to empowerment. As she spoke, she saw some nurses nodding along, their expressions supportive. However, Grace was a constant figure of resistance, her scowl deepening as the presentation continued. Naomi then transitioned to a series of data points, highlighting the positive changes seen since their initiative began. Since we focused on compassion, we've seen a marked decrease in patient complaints and an increase in positive feedback. Staff morale has improved as well, with many feeling more engaged and supported. But just as she began to feel the tide turning in her favor, Grace sprang into action. "This is all well and good, Naomi," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "But what you're suggesting is a drastic shift in how we operate. We can't compromise on efficiency for the sake of emotional sentiment. What happens when we have an emergency? Are you suggesting we coddle patients at the expense of their care?" The room fell silent, and Naomi felt a rush of adrenaline. This was the moment she had been preparing for, and she knew she had to address Grace's challenge head-on. "Grace, I believe that compassion and efficiency can coexist. In fact, they should. A patient who feels cared for is more likely to cooperate with their treatment plan, which ultimately leads to better outcomes." But Grace wasn't done. "And what about the staff who are already stretched thin? Are we supposed to add emotional labor to an already daunting workload? We have to prioritize efficiency and results, not feelings." Naomi took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she prepared to respond. "I understand that we all work under tremendous pressure, but I believe that when we create a culture of support and empathy, we alleviate some of that pressure. Nurses who feel valued and respected are more likely to give their best to patients. It's a cycle. Compassion leads to better care, and better care leads to a healthier workplace." The tension in the room was palpable, and she could see the divide growing more pronounced. Some nurses leaned forward, clearly engaged in the discussion, while others looked uncomfortable. Naomi sensed that this was a pivotal moment, not just for her initiative, but for the future of Breerwood itself. As she continued to address the room, she noticed a few senior nurses nodding along, their expressions softening. "We're all here because we want to help people. If we can combine our clinical expertise with compassion, we'll create an environment that fosters healing, not just for our patients, but for us as well." Grace leaned back, arms crossed defiantly, but her demeanor seemed less assured. The battle lines had been drawn, but Naomi was no longer fighting alone. She had the support of her colleagues, and she could feel their energy shifting. After the presentation concluded, Naomi opened the floor to discussion, inviting her colleagues to share their thoughts and experiences. One by one, nurses began to share stories of their own, moments when compassion had made a tangible difference in patient care. "I had a patient who was terrified of the procedure," one nurse said, her voice wavering. "But when I took the time to sit with her, explain everything, and just listen, she calmed down and went through with it. I truly believe that compassion saved her from a panic attack." Another nurse chimed in. "When we had that tough case with the little girl last month, it was our ability to connect with her that made all the difference. We can't underestimate the power of kindness." The room buzzed with voices, each nurse sharing their experiences, and Naomi felt the momentum shift. Grace's side of the room, once vocal and assertive, now seemed quieter, more defensive. As the discussion deepened, Naomi realized they were no longer just advocating for a change in workplace culture. They were collectively redefining what it meant to be a nurse. This was about creating a legacy, one that embraced compassion as an integral part of patient care. By the time the meeting concluded, there was a palpable sense of unity among the staff. Naomi felt a wave of relief wash over her as she stepped away from the podium, knowing that they had ignited something significant. But Grace, though quieted, was not finished. As the meeting dispersed, she approached Naomi, her expression one of barely concealed fury. "You think this is over? You think you've won? This is just the beginning. You'll see." Naomi met her gaze, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. This isn't about winning or losing, Grace. It's about creating a better environment for our patients and ourselves. I hope you'll join us in that effort." With that, Naomi walked away, feeling the weight of the day's events settle in. She knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but she also understood that she was part of a movement, a force that was determined to redefine care in their hospital. As she left the conference room, surrounded by her supportive colleagues, Naomi felt a profound sense of hope. Together, they would continue to advocate for the change that was so desperately needed, and they would rise above the discord, united by a shared commitment to compassion and care. The dawn of a new era at Brearwood Medical Center was on the horizon, and with every step forward, Naomi felt the promise of a brighter future for both patients and nurses alike. This was just the beginning of their journey, and she was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead.